Welcome to Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z. This podcast is all about conversations about healing and rising from the ashes of your grief and trauma. In this podcast, we will be deconstructing and highlighting the different aspects of grief and loss. I'm your host, Dr. Christina Zampatella. Hello, this is Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z. I'm Christina Zampatella, and I'm here with Danielle Ragazzo, who is one of the therapists here at the Center for Grief and Trauma Therapy. Thank you so much for being here today. Truly appreciate the time you're taking to talk with us about children and grief.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
It's very exciting.
It is very exciting, right? So if you might be able to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background, your education, what you're doing in your career.
Sure. So I've been working with children for a very long time. I've considered myself always a helper. So to be in the helping field is where I feel that I can really ignite my passion and energy as well. I started off in school counseling. So I was a school counselor for almost 10 years. So I worked with children individually, family, group, doing crisis intervention as well, and helping families adapt to different situations, of course, in a kid's life as well, through all the developmental stages. I mainly focused on kindergarten through 5th grade, but I also have experience in middle school and high school as well. And I coached lacrosse in high school for a lot of years too.
I didn't know you coached lacrosse.
Yeah.
I would love to see you play lacrosse. I bet you are badass. She is like this hummingbird. Like I know I always call her that, and she's so sweet. I would love to see you like barrel somebody down.
Oh
on the
yeah,
oh,
super fun. Get people out from behind the knees.
I know what we're doing at our next party here at the office. We're having lacrosse.
Yes, and Marcus used to play lacrosse too. We were together.
Oh, good. I get to sit there and get beat up. All right,
yeah.
so a lot of experience in working with kids as a school counselor, and then where did you go?
And then after I was school counseling, I took a little break because I was interested in getting more involved in private practice. It was so hard in the schools being able to help the children and the families the way that I felt like I really wanted to. Okay. It's hard to get in depth when you're working around the school hours and academic settings.
Sure, okay. Yeah.
So especially in something as acute as a loss, when a child would lose a parent or a loved one. And then it's like, okay, and then you go to math next, or you go to art.
Yeah.
So having that part of being able to work with the child, especially during those difficult times, it's very difficult to do in an academic setting.
Gotcha.
So the amazing thing about getting involved in this incredible practice is you get the time to be able to just look at the child and be able to listen to them and tune in to what they're sharing as well.
That's so nice. So you have been with the Center for Grief and Trauma Therapy for
almost 3 years. So about
years.
2.5 now.
Yeah, 2.5 years. And you've been working with all ages.
Yes.
But your passion really, really is there with the kids with grief and trauma. So that's where you're at right now. And you've got your master's degree in education, but was there a specific focus in your master's program?
Yes. So my bachelor's is in science and family and community studies.
Okay.
And so for my master's, it's a master's in education in elementary and secondary counseling.
Okay. Oh, cool.
So that way it kind of rounds everything together.
It did. It really did.
As well. Yeah.
So big topic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the idea of children spans anywhere from, 0 all the way through this random 18-year-old, but anyway, for me, children always seem to be anybody who's, 15 years younger than me, which is ridiculous, but okay. Old is always 15 years older, and
there you go.
Kid is always 15 years younger.
Yeah.
Other than that, you're my contemporary. So I'm making that up right now. So maybe can you share with us what you see is the difference between children who grieve and adults who grieve?
Sure. So adults in general, we should say people respond to grief in different ways. We know the grief process is different for everyone, just like people respond differently and have different reactions to their feelings. Grief is very similar in that way. How children are different is children are very present. Meaning children are present and literal in a lot of the things that they do and how they see their world as
Okay.
well. As adults, we have a difficult time being present,
Absolutely.
right? Often
And we're more abstract
yeah.
in the way we operate in the world.
Yes. And with kids, usually developmentally, the abstract thinking doesn't occur until around 10 to 12.
Right.
So
Right.
kids are concrete. The sky is blue. Why? Because the sky is blue. The
Mhm.
grass is green. Why? Because my mom told me it was green and I know the color green. And
Right.
that is. They're very literal
Okay.
too. So in concrete thinking, it can be different. So when I say they're present, it's because as adults, we often look back or look forward.
Mhm.
It's very difficult staying in the moment.
Right.
So as adults, we grieve what we've lost. We grieve what we're going to lose.
Right.
As well.
Right.
Kids respond different because it's temporary.
Mm.
If they're hungry now, they're hungry now.
Right.
Adults might say, yeah, but we're going to plan to eat around 8 because that's how it works. But kids see their needs and what they're experiencing now. So the grief is different because they don't often see what's going to come next.
Because they don't have that same concept of of time. I know, especially the younger ones.
Mm-hmm.
I had a friend of mine who had a daughter. I mean, she must have been about 3.
Okay.
So the concept of time hadn't kicked in yet. So he would give her like a heads up about what time it was to go to bed. And he would say, all right, you got 10 minutes. And she said, no, 5. And he's like, all right,
All right.
5 it is. You got it. But I mean,
Yeah.
it truly was. I mean, it's such a good example of cognitive development and how we wrap around. I mean, children don't have a whole lot of experience with loss, right? So they don't have a sense of it could get better.
Mm-hmm.
So not only in time it could get better, but also in experience, not knowing that it could get better. They just know that they feel the way they feel and are right now. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes.
So how does that impact their behavior?
Often we see children regressing in some
Okay.
of their behaviors.
So that's normal.
that is very typical.
And adults need to know that
yes.
they are they might be 5 and they're regressing back to 3, and getting angry at that makes no sense because that's the way that they're dealing with it.
Yes. That's
We
the
all
response.
regress, right?
Yes.
Even as adults, we regress over time.
Oh,
when we
yes.
have a loss. All right, so you see them regress.
You see them regress. That
Okay.
could be if they used to suck their thumb. They haven't done it for years. Why are you sucking your thumb now?
Okay.
It's something that often as children they find that it's a self-soothing
Yeah, it's a soothing
technique.
Right.
So they might start that again. And maybe something like they've been sleeping in their own bed but now they want to sleep with you.
Right.
The attachment. And that's how a lot of times separation anxiety can also come.
Okay.
In addition to the regression of the behavior.
So an increase in separation anxiety. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Especially if we've lost a parent or a caretaker.
Seems to be higher when losing a parent or caretaker, where their separation anxiety goes up. And so then, yes, trying to climb, hey, I want to go to, back into your mom and dad's bed or parents' bed. But how else might that come out in like school or their friends or with other people?
And a lot of times too, children respond differently. So a lot of times adults may say, I'm worried because they haven't cried yet. Or I'm worried because they're not really talking
Mm-hmm.
about their mom, dad, aunt,
Mm-hmm.
dog.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean they're not grieving.
Say more about that.
Okay.
Unpack that a little bit more.
Sure. So children, when they respond, let's say they may say, ask a random question that you feel like came from nowhere. Well, if they lost their dad, well, where's my dad now?
Right.
Which that could be when they are in the middle of playing a video game, or that could be when they're riding their bike and you see it as that came out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
But then you answer their question, okay, and then they can continue on their bike ride. They may ask to go to a friend's house. Whereas as an adult, we might want to push. We might want to delve in more. That kids often come with short bursts.
Right.
Of that. It's short bouts of grief.
Short bouts of grief. I think, and I know that I have worked with a lot of parents who have lost either their spouse or another child. So they've talked about their surviving children, and they've talked about how they've been confused because basically they don't have conversations around their grief the way that an adult would. I feel sad, this is hard, and maybe they don't even have words for that kind of stuff. And being confused that just because they're playing at the funeral doesn't mean they're not grieving. So you get a lot of disenfranchisement of they don't even understand what's going on.
Yes.
Would you say that that's something that you see?
Totally.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Because as adults, we think they need to do it more.
Right.
Or they need to play. That means they're not missing them. It doesn't mean that.
It doesn't.
And kids, especially before the age of 9 or 10, they're little sponges.
Yeah.
If we're looking under the age of 5, they may not understand how to express what they're feeling or communicate it.
Right.
But it doesn't mean they're not noticing the changes.
So how do they express when they don't have the words or the emotional vocabulary? How do they express their grief and their trauma? Right?
Oh,
And their
yes.
trauma.
Definitely. Sometimes it can come out as anger.
Okay.
Sometimes it can come out with sadness to where we feel like they might have big reactions to small things.
Okay.
For example, if they lost a toy, you think it's fine, I can just go to the store and another one, but they break down and start sobbing.
Right.
Well, I want another cookie. You've already had 2. You're good.
Right.
I want another cookie.
Right.
Like, it's only a cookie. What's about? It's not about the cookie.
Right.
They sense things going on. They know there's a shift.
Right.
So even though they can't fully understand it or express it, that is their way of expressing it.
Would you say that they express it in play and art too?
Mm-hmm.
How might you see that in art? Like if they were drawing, for example. I mean, I know that we've got some things that mental health professionals would be like, draw a picture of your family. But that's specific because we're evaluating.
Yes.
Right? And we may see like, oh, dad's not even in the picture, or dad is, or dad's over here. And, but what would you see if there was like a child engaging in spontaneous art? Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if they decided without prompts?
Without prompts.
Mm-hmm.
What might that look like? Can you give an example?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, one, doing the family portraits is always interesting.
Right.
in
It really
itself.
is. Yeah.
It's interesting to see where the child is going to place themselves,
Mm-hmm.
whether they are a part of the family system and where everyone else is.
Mm-hmm.
Usually if I do family pictures like that, I might ask, okay, well, where are you? Are you in your room?
Mm-hmm.
And then you pay attention to where they add the other people.
Right.
Also, even breaking it down to who they choose first.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Okay, yeah, sure.
So a younger child who is still in the very egocentric stage often puts themselves first.
Sure.
However, if they have pets, the pets usually come first.
Really?
Yeah. So we might have a cat, we might have a doll, we have a little hamster in there. They come first.
My cats and my dog are the favorite people in my house. So I get it because I would
Yeah.
probably draw my
They're going
cats.
to come first.
Sorry, Jeff.
Yeah. Sorry.
What stepsons? Yeah. So I did not know that,
Yeah.
because as I was talking to you, before we started today, I don't work with children. That's never been, my gig, and so I have worked with parents who have had children that are grieving, and I'm able to look at it kind of theoretically, but like talking with somebody who's actually worked with children with grief and trauma, I had no idea that sometimes in that egocentric stage that they would draw their pet first. That's fascinating to me. I had no idea. Huh.
It is
Way
very
more
cool.
important than their brother.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
More
Yeah,
important.
your brother sometimes you have to remind yourself, who else is there?
So you keep mentioning, and rightfully so, that before like 9, 10, 11, somewhere in there, there's this kind of developmental shift, right? So I am aware that there's something called a death construct development. And it is completely based on cognitive development. So a child's understanding of what death is grows over time based on their brain's ability to develop their cognitive ability. So I'm wondering, when you're talking about differences in cognitive development, are you seeing differences like, so for example, in death construct development, we're looking at things like all things die, right? People who die are non-functional. People or things that die have died for a reason, that they're not coming back, and that there's maybe non-corporeal continuation, and in English meaning there might be something that happens after you die, which that seems to be the one that comes last, because that requires a lot of abstract thinking, right? So you need to have somebody who's old enough to start thinking like, where's heaven? Because I have heard, and this is from a client that I was working with who was an adult. She goes, I was just talking to my son. Her husband had died in a motorcycle accident. So she goes, I was just talking to my son, who's 5 years old, and she said, he asked me where daddy is. And I told him he's in heaven. And he said, well, where's heaven? And she said, well, it's up in the sky. And she goes, and then we got in a plane. And he looked and he goes, I don't see daddy. You could be talking about the 7-Eleven around the corner. You might as well, if you're saying heaven, you might as well be talking about some store. Like, it's that literal. So I'm hearing you say that.
Yes.
So do you see this death construct development happening over time with children?
Definitely.
Like a building up of understanding it?
Yes.
How do you think that impacts the way they understand? Like if they're understanding death at different, I don't know, growth in different developments, how do you think a parent might experience a child who's lost somebody at 5 and is growing up into a more mature death construct understanding? Is that?
Yeah, good question.
All right.
Yes. So one, I think it's important to note that little minds grow at different rates.
Right. Oh, that's important to know.
Too.
Yeah.
Because sometimes even if you do 3 to 5 range, 6 to 9 range, little minds grow different. So it's important to give leeway in that as well.
Right.
And I say, oh, well, they need to be experiencing more. I think they should understand more.
Okay.
Because everything comes with time.
Okay. Important for parents to hear that. Okay. So they don't think their child's doing something wrong if they're not following a very specific set of steps. Okay.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
So, and the construct is dependent on how real they feel that death is and how open they are to understanding more.
Okay.
Which comes from a nurturing, supportive environment as well.
Oh, that's an important statement.
Yeah.
Because what if you have somebody, let's just say you have one person, or he, she, or they have lost a spouse. And now you have this 5-year-old child who's grieving his or her, deceased parent. And the surviving parent just is not doing very well, understandably.
Yes.
And then you have a child who's grieving, and everybody's grieving together, but yet we want a supportive, loving environment for this child, as we should. Oh my gosh, then what? What do we do?
And that adds another
It's a whole nother
difficult layer,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
And I've had clients that have lost that other and that co-parent, and it makes it so difficult because they need their time to grieve too.
Right.
And kids are always watching you.
Yeah.
So they're picking up on what behavior you're modeling.
God, what a lot of pressure for the parent, for the surviving parent.
Oh, yes.
Like, I better either keep it together, or I better show how much grief is appropriate, or whether, because, my son is watching me grieve. And yet I'm not in that frame of mind.
Yes.
Wow. Boy, we're really not paying attention to this in the society.
No.
At all. Nobody talks about this. So what can we do?
Well, one, if there's a village, utilize your village.
Okay.
Which the Old Testament of it takes a village to raise a child, I believe that. It takes your village.
Okay.
And your village doesn't have to be very big.
Okay.
It's what people are present and what people are there to support you as well.
And you need to be able to communicate what support looks like.
Yes.
That's hard when you're in the middle of an acute grieving process.
Oh, yes. But even if it
You have
is
to.
something,
Yeah.
even if it's something where if you decide to come and I want to have my child in therapy to be able to
Mhm.
talk about their grief. I'm going to be in therapy myself.
Right.
Mommy's getting the help she needs too.
Well, and we have that here where we have different family members that are all in it, and then we're able to talk about how to support the family as a whole. And that can be really helpful, is what I'm
Yes.
hearing you say. So, um, what about in schools? I mean, you are coming from a background where you saw a lot of how schools really poorly handled children that are grieving, from anywhere from being in the classroom and the teachers not picking up on it, to administration who just don't get it, to, and I have a horror story about a couple of different schools out here about how they handled the death of a young lady who died by suicide, with, in a very violent way, and how that was handled in the school, because a couple of the people there are teachers in the school, and what administration said to them is I couldn't, it was hard for me to wrap my head around. It was so poorly taken care of. So what are schools doing wrong?
Well, that's a hot topic
I know,
as well.
But that's a good thing
But-
to have in your own podcast. You can say whatever the hell you want.
That's
So-
very true. That's very true. That's right. Well, one, you know
Just
me,
so
I
you
like
know.
to do the positive. So
Yes.
what schools are doing
Oh,
right
we want to talk about it.
is
Fair
and then
enough.
we'll talk about it.
Fair enough. Fair
Back
enough.
around. So
Okay.
what schools are doing right is they're understanding that what kids are experiencing in their world,
Okay.
what we're experiencing as humans, needs to be addressed.
So they're getting that.
They're getting that.
Okay.
That is 8 hours. At least think about how much time kids spend in school. That's 8 hours
Absolutely.
of they're getting. They come home, they're home for a few hours, you have dinner, and then you're going to sleep
Okay.
too. So that time is essential as well.
Okay.
What would be helpful if they did more is, one, have a comprehensive plan.
Okay.
So that could be something, whether I'm old school, so I like tangible in a folder, in a binder or something, but that could be digital, something that people have access to. So
Okay.
when they know if it's a loss of a student, if it's a loss of a teacher, if it's a loss of a principal, you know who you have to pull on. That could be outside community help. That could be inside, using psychologists, using psychiatrists, anyone that's already involved in the school,
Mm-hmm.
bringing in the people, meeting in, unfortunately, the school that we have around here, and we have a couple of clients that lost really important people in their life as well.
Mhm.
And some of the school's responses that were not good was throwing them all in the library and then asking them to talk about their feelings.
Ooh.
Nobody wants to do that, especially not a 16-year-old that is
Right.
grieving the loss of their best friend.
Right.
You need something more specific,
Right.
and you need them to be able to feel that they can openly communicate what they're feeling as
Right.
well. And already we're afraid of shame and embarrassment and ridicule, especially in something like a high school,
Absolutely.
right? We
Yep.
don't need extra eyes on us.
Right.
And that's similar to middle school and elementary as well. So getting
Yeah.
them in a private area
Okay.
where they can
So safe
talk about their
space.
feelings, a safe space,
Okay.
definitely.
With a safe person, I imagine.
With a safe
like a point
person. Yeah.
who
That they
gets
can
it.
establish a relationship
Yeah.
with too. It's difficult
So
if you were
school
going to bring
counselor.
in, yeah,
Okay.
it's difficult if you're bringing in a social worker that they've never met and they're like, who is this lady and why am I
Well,
going to share my story with you?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So it helps to have a trusted person
Okay.
that they believe
Okay.
as well and that
Okay.
they know they can talk to.
Perfect. Okay. What might be some other ideas that they like? Maybe a parent could ask the school to do. So safe, a point person in a safe
Mhm.
space. What else could be helpful?
Point person, safe place, breaks when needed. So that could even be a nonverbal signal or
Okay.
sign
Okay.
that a child
So
can
for the
use
teacher to know.
for the teacher to know
Okay.
they need a break.
Okay.
Because sometimes if you ask to use the bathroom, sometimes, well, you've already used the bathroom. Or
Yeah.
sometimes teachers too, we don't want kids wandering the halls. So sometimes it helps to have something a little bit more specific. That way
Okay.
they can give you a nonverbal signal and you can say, okay. And they can take a walk down the hall, take a break outside, cry for a minute,
Yeah.
come back to it.
Okay.
Attention a lot of times can feel so overwhelming
I bet.
too.
So too many people going, oh, if you need any, or whatever, they're going to say to the child
Yeah.
could be too overwhelming for them. And so they might shut down.
Yes.
Okay.
They could shut down. And how they learn to regulate their emotions and what they're going through too is helpful. So the break is something that they can be in control of.
Who can help them with that?
That could be a school counselor, that
Okay.
could be a teacher, or that could even be a parent that has a conversation with the child and then transcribes that message to the teacher. Hey, heads up, if my child, gives you this, is it okay with you if they take a break?
So the parent needs to definitely get in there and have these conversations with teachers and like really advocate for their child, especially as they're younger, to be able to say, please look out for these behaviors because, by the way, this isn't the norm, but he's going through this right now. So if you see this, and to be able to also say, I imagine and tell me if I'm wrong, because this is, of course, I've never worked in the schools, but call me if you need me, call me, because if there's something going on with him and he is just lashing out, he's throwing stuff, and I've heard it all. So please, this is how you can get a hold of me as well, so that the child knows that he or she or they have access to their parent or a trusted adult, even not necessarily in the school, but they would be able to reach out if they needed to.
Yes.
Do you think that would be helpful?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. And a lot of times that can be done in the nurse's office.
Right.
Or even in the principal's office or
Okay.
somewhere, again, where they can have that privacy and be able to talk to that trusted person.
Okay, got it.
Thank you for listening to Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z. If you found this podcast helpful, please share it, subscribe, and leave a rating or review wherever you get your podcasts. We want to be a resource for anyone who is experiencing loss, and this is a simple way you can help us spread the word. Check out our show description. There you'll find a link to connect with me on social media, as well as helpful articles and resources.